Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to a live stream. I thought I would hop on here and comment about a story that just broke from Kitco News regarding the Chinese yuan and the international payments, the volume of those payments that are being made in the dollar and the Chinese yuan. Because as far as China's cross-border payment settlement, the yuan just surpassed the dollar for the first time. So if you're hopping on here, welcome. This is actually my first time live streaming via mobile, so bear with me here if there's any hiccups. But hi to those of you who are saying hello there in the chat. Please smash the like button, help get this video out there in the algorithm. Okay, so what are we talking about today? Well, the Chinese yuan, it's been being used more and more internationally as both a reserve and as a form of payment, especially following the sanctions that were placed on Russia following their invasion of Ukraine last year. We had their dollar assets frozen, the dollar's been weaponized, and so we've seen this shift away from the dollar and towards local currencies as a way of settling these international payments. But this month, we just got the data out of China, and it's actually the data from March, so it's a month behind. But there's two very notable trends here with Chinese trade data. The first one is that their cross-border payments rose in March to $549.9 billion worth of cross-border payments. And that is a record. That is up from 434 billion dollars in February. So more than a $100 billion increase, more than a 20% increase in the cross-border payment volume in China. And also, very notably, the Chinese yuan has surpassed the dollar as the primary currency for settling those cross-border payments. In March, 48.4% of those payments were settled in Chinese yuan. That is compared to 46.7% that were settled in US dollars. That is a declining percentage. In February, the dollar represented 48.6% of those settlements. So almost a 2% reduction in 1 month in the dollar's volume in those trade settlements. So why does this matter? Why is this important? Well, all of this means that the purchasing power of the dollar, it's going to be on the way down in the near future. And there's no guarantee that that's what's going to happen in the short term. We could see all sorts of messy economic outcomes as a result of this de-dollarization trend. I mean, we do still have rising interest rates around the world, and that means that all of those countries that are holding dollar-denominated debt as a result of the IMF going around the world and getting them indebted in dollar terms, they're going to need to buy dollars to pay the interest on those loans. They're going to need dollars to service that debt. So there is going to continue to be a demand for dollars as long as interest rates are moving up. But in the long run, the dollar's very status as the world reserve currency and as the primary means of settling international payment settlements, that is what is going to be at risk as a result of this de-dollarization trend. So short term, anything can happen. Long term, very likely that we are going to see a decline in the purchasing power of the dollar. And that's why we want to be getting into hard assets right now. Gold, silver, physical, tangible assets that you can hold in your hand. I mean, there's plenty of other things going on in the economy that would make us want to get into silver. And we've got First Republic Bank, for example. They're struggling this morning. They're down more than 50% over the past two trading sessions. Look like they're going to need another bailout. So, we're going to have more bailouts coming, and there's plenty of reasons to want to get into hard assets. But this de-dollarization trend, I think this is really going to be the driving factor in the long term over the next decade plus in what we're going to see in the precious metals. Because what we are going to see is the dollar price of the precious metals increasing. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the purchasing power of the precious metals is going to increase, because this is likely to coincide with a devaluing of the US dollar, of the currency, and much higher inflation. But at least the precious metals will be a way to protect purchasing power, at least that they're going to be a way to preserve what purchasing power you have versus paper assets, which are going to be devalued. Now, there was some concern last month, with SVB and banking crisis, people thinking that their bank deposits might not be safe. And the Fed and the Treasury, they came to the rescue. They bailed everybody out, ensured everybody that all the depositors are going to be made whole. But the risk there is that either way, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if on the one hand the depositors' deposits are not safe, then your money's gone. But if you get paid off in worthless fiat currency, that's a huge problem too. It's like you get paid, but your money doesn't buy you anything. So we got these bailouts going on, but the de-dollarization trend, this idea of the yuan surpassing the US dollar, I do think that that is going to be the really big threat over the next several years to the purchasing power of the dollar. And really, it's kind of a perfect storm. And hello to everybody in the chat. We've got some folks here. I got to kind of cock my head because I got the phone at 90 degrees to read your chat messages. But hello to all of you. If you're new to the channel, please do smash that like button. If you're not subscribed yet, why not subscribe? Give me a subscription and you'll be notified when there's more live streams like this. Kind of like the live stream thing. I'm going to try to do more of these. Let me know what you think about the live stream versus the produced video format. But certainly, live streams are a little bit easier to I can do a more volume of content if it's via live stream because there's no editing or anything like that. And it kind of puts me on the spot too. Sometimes you'll be shooting a video and you misspeak or something like that. You go back, you edit it out, you remove all the stuff like that. But in the live stream, it's just, you're live. So you gotta roll with it, which I kind of like. Anyway, so the yuan is surpassing the dollar in terms of the volume of trade in China by several percentage points now, and in just a month it has surpassed it by quite a bit. So imagine what's going to happen moving forward. And none of this is a surprise. None of this is something that couldn't be foreseen. We've already seen Brazil and China, for example. They are conducting all of their bilateral trade now in yuan. They've dumped the dollar, and that's about $150 billion on its own of bilateral trade. Brazil is the biggest economy in Latin America, and China is their biggest trading partner. So, the yuan is going to be a big currency for the BRICS nations, especially moving forward. We know that. It might even be the basis of a BRICS currency. This August, the BRICS are having their annual summit hosted in South Africa. There's a lot of important stuff on the agenda there. We might see Iran and Saudi Arabia join the BRICS organizations. Other countries have expressed an interest in joining. We know that the ruling party in South Africa has told us that expansion of BRICS and admitting new members is going to be a critical component of that meeting. And also, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, he's told us that a primary component of that summit is going to be the creation of a new BRICS currency, or at least laying the foundation for what will be a BRICS currency. And the yuan is likely to play a significant role in that new currency. It has a lot of things going for it. It's already used for settling international trade quite a bit. China is the second biggest economy in the world. They export a ton of stuff. They import a lot of stuff too. They do a tremendous amount of international trade. So if you're trading with China, then the yuan is an obvious currency to trade in. It's very likely that Saudi Arabia is going to begin transacting at least some of their transactions with China in the yuan. They've hinted at this multiple times. Back in March, they told us they were considering the yuan. That's March of 2022, by the way. And then in January, their finance minister told us in a Bloomberg interview at Davos that the Saudis are open to accepting currencies other than the US dollar for their oil. So this undermines the petrodollar system, a system where all of OPEC's oil is priced in US dollars, creates a tremendous amount of organic demand for US dollars around the world. And that system is on much shakier ground than it ever has been in the 5 decades plus of its existence. So, the yuan is threatening the dollar on multiple fronts. And a lot of these countries like Brazil and like Saudi Arabia and like I believe Iraq as well, China is their biggest trading partner. So what incentive do they have to use the dollar for settling international trade when they do more trade with China? It just kind of makes sense to use the Chinese currency to settle those payments, especially in an environment, a geopolitical environment where holding US dollars might expose you to the risk of sanctions. Just look at what Russia had done to them. I mean, all of their US dollar assets just completely frozen. So there's a huge risk in holding US dollars, but not with precious metals. That is one of the reasons why we've seen central banks around the world recently loading up on gold. As far as I know, none of the central banks are holding any silver. I'm not entirely sure about that. If you know, put it in the chat. If you know how many or what institutions out there are holding silver, I'm not really sure. I don't think any central banks officially hold silver, but who knows? I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they've got some vaults somewhere with some silver, especially considering how cheap silver is today. You know, you could allocate a couple $100 million to silver and have a gigantic stack, and you know, maybe you don't tell anybody about it. I'm sure China has huge reserves of silver. I mean, one, because it's an industrial metal and they do so much manufacturing over there. You know, they're incredibly dependent on this stuff. But this de-dollarization stuff with the yuan surpassing the dollar, you know, we had lots of foreshadowing. Like I mentioned, the Brazil arrangement where they agreed to dump the dollar for their bilateral trade. And it's not just Brazil. We had Iraq do the same thing. Iraq is transacting exclusively in the yuan for their bilateral trade between them and China, with the exception, however, of oil. The Iraqis, you know, they probably don't want to get invaded again. So they're still pricing their oil in dollars. They're still participating in the petrodollar system. You know, they know what happens when you ditch the petrodollar system and you don't have a nuclear arsenal to protect yourself, you know? You end up getting either killed by a group of fundamentalist militia like Muammar Gaddafi, or you get strung up like Saddam Hussein. So, you know, Iraq is probably making the smart move by continuing to price their oil in dollars, but that's not going to last for very long. I mean, it could even end this year. I really have a strong suspicion that in August, when the BRICS countries get together and you've got Saudi Arabia, the de facto leader of OPEC, joining, that there's a real threat to that dollar pricing for oil. And that's just going to combine with all of these other threats. You know, the domestic problems where we have probably by August, looks like we're going to have more bank bailouts. I mean, I would be shocked if we make it to August without having another financial crisis. We've already got First Republic having all this distress. And look, you know, it's hard to say what's going to break in an economy like ours. You have to have kind of a crystal ball or be a lot smarter than I am to know what is going to happen. But in a broad sense, when you have rising interest rates and rising inflation, and you have an economy that is so ridden with debt and so levered up like ours, it's a no-brainer. You don't have to have a PhD in economics to understand that something is going to break. I put out a video titled "The Pullback in Silver Can't Last" a couple months ago. It was right before the collapse of SVB, and in that video I said the same thing. I said, look, something's going to break here. I don't know what it is. I can't tell you what it is, but obviously something is going to break. And then a week later, you know, the banking sector began to collapse. We had the second and third largest bank failures in U.S. history. And like, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. You know, I've made bad calls before that didn't turn out to be true, or that I was, you know, incorrect. But to say that we're headed for disaster in our economy when we got 31.6, now $31.7 trillion in debt, we got hundreds of trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities. We've got bailouts. We know the Fed's going to bail out the banks if they begin to collapse again. I mean, that's what they did this past time. Just look at their balance sheet, you know, with the BTFP, the Bank Term Funding Program. They've already taken on a bunch of bad assets onto their balance sheet. So if FRC, First Republic Bank, if they begin to collapse, if depositors look like they're going to lose their savings, then absolutely the Fed will do whatever it needs to do to I'm looking at the chat here. Someone says turn camera. Yeah, not a face reveal today. Sorry, guys. Someone else says zero money in the bank. I'm going to go to the chat here real quick because there's a bunch of messages. Thanks everybody who's chiming in here. Man, the chat's kind of weird on mobile. It keeps like fading in and out, so it's kind of hard for me to read your comments. I got to get used to this. But you know, let's get back to the yuan thing. So yeah, the yuan surpassing the dollar. Brazil, Iraq, also France. You know, France taking payment for natural gas via the UAE in yuan. That was French energy giant Total Energies earlier. I don't remember exactly when it was, a couple weeks ago. It might not have been in April, it might have been the end of March. But very recently, within the past month, Total Energies sold 65,000 tons of UAE natural gas to China, and they took payment in yuan. So this is even U.S. allies accepting payments. Someone says, boomer on the camera. Turn your phone sideways. It's in portrait mode. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I'm actually a millennial, not a boomer, but I guess that's a boomer move. I'm not sure if I can swing this around with my tripod here. Let's see if that works better. There you go, guys. Boomer on the camera. Oh, please, I'm not a boomer. I'm sure there's lots of boomers watching. I love you, boomers. Don't worry. But I'm not one myself, although I might be acting like one with my social media skills here in the camera. Okay, I hope that's better. If you guys can see things better now, let me know. I'm not sure how to shift portrait again. First time mobile live streaming. Anyway, back to the Chinese yuan thing. So yeah, France accepting Chinese yuan for gas payments. And that is just the first of many payments for energy that are going to be settled in yuan in the very near future. Maybe not in yuan, who knows? Maybe in a BRICS currency, or maybe in a gold-backed stablecoin, the kind that Russia and Iran are working on. I'm not sure exactly what these international payments between the BRICS nations are going to get settled in, but it's not going to be dollars. That's the important thing. And listen, someone says worse. Maybe the camera's worse. Okay, I'm sorry. I know you guys aren't here to see my hands. I'm not really a hand model or the coins anyway. You're here just for the commentary, I would expect. So I'm not going to mess around with the camera anymore. Yeah, exactly. Not here for the picture, I'm sure. And please, hey, if you haven't smashed that like button yet, I see we've got 40 some likes. There's 100 something people watching. Smash that like button. Do me a favor and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I do appreciate everybody tuning in, though. These are kind of fun. I like communicating with you guys in real time. Okay, so the French taking the yuan for energy. This sets a strong precedent that there's going to be an undermining of the petrodollar. And I saw a video yesterday. I put a video out about this where this guy with popular YouTube channel was claiming that the de-dollarization is just Chinese propaganda. And again, I just want to reiterate, I'm not bought and paid for by the CCP. Listen, in my opinion, Taiwan is an independent, self-governing nation. By making that statement alone, I think you should know that I'm not in the CCP pocket. But that doesn't mean that I can't recognize what's going on. I like that the dollar is the world reserve currency. I live in the U.S. I mean, it benefits me tremendously. I don't want that system to end, but you can't ignore the writing on the wall. I want to get a gold metal detector, but I'm not sure if I'll make ROI on it. Lars Larson says that. I don't know, man. Probably depends on where you live, how much gold there is, and what kind of a metal detector you get, and how diligent you are with your prospecting with it. It's probably the sort of thing you got to build up a bit of a skill set with, I would imagine. Yeah, look at old maps. Okay, we're talking about metal detecting. I like live streams. We can kind of go down some weird rabbit holes. Metal detecting I always thought would be fun, especially you go out find a big gold nugget or something, or if you live somewhere where maybe there's some historical sites where maybe you can find some old silver coins or gold coins. Pretty amazing if you find something like that. Okay, so this is not Chinese propaganda, talking about de-dollarization. These are just numbers. Now, to be fair, these numbers do come out of some state economic agency in China, so it is possible that they could be misrepresenting the amount of dollars being used in cross-border payments, but I just don't think that there's any need for them to fabricate those numbers because we know that all of these countries are signing on to these cross-border arrangements, cross-border payment arrangements, where they're resorting to the yuan and they're dumping the dollar. It's no secret that this is going on. So I don't think this is propaganda. Now, there is propaganda out there, I'm sure, on both sides. I would expect the CCP to exploit the de-dollarization trend to the best of their ability. Of course, they're going to do that. They are going to pursue their own self-interest, just like any news bite or any story the U.S. will exploit to its advantage. That's just to be expected. But de-dollarization is a real thing, and because the world is de-dollarizing, it means that saving your wealth in dollars probably a risky endeavor. A lot of the world is coming to that point of view. That's why they're dumping it as a reserve, and it's still going to be a primary reserve currency for a long time. I mean, even if it loses its world reserve currency status, that doesn't mean no one's going to hold dollars. The U.S. is still the world's biggest economy. That's not going to change overnight. And there's still going to be a lot of dollars out there. But the problem is that the way we've set ourselves up with the way that we borrow money and spend it and export our inflation around the world, that is the problem. It's not that the world is not going to hold a tremendous amount of dollars. It's that we always need the world to be accepting more and more dollars. I mean, just look at the latest monthly statement out of the Treasury. According to that statement, from October to March, that's the first 6 months of fiscal year 2023, the US deficit was $1.1 trillion. So annualize that, $2.2 trillion. How do you run a $2.2 trillion deficit when there is a decreased demand around the world for dollars? Well, I'll tell you how you do it. You inflate the currency, you print a bunch of money, and you destroy the purchasing power of your currency. And as a general rule, that's what you do as a nation with a central bank to pay off exorbitant levels of debt in the first place. You pay it off in devalued currency. I mean, what's the alternative, right? The alternative is to raise taxes and cut government spending. But, I mean, what kind of political will is there for that? What's more politically expedient, to tell people, hey, you don't have to pay anything and we're going to give you everything that you want from the government? Or, hey, listen, folks, you're going to need to pay higher taxes and you're going to get less out of us because, we've been imprudent in our fiscal and monetary policy for the past 50 years since the dollar was taken off the gold standard. So now you've got to pay the piper. I mean, I think we all know the direction that this is going to go in. The likelihood of the US balancing their budget and getting spending under control is, well, it's like a snowball's chance in hell. It's not going to happen. So you want to get into hard assets. You want to protect yourself against the inflation that is going to result from the necessity to pay off this onerous levels of debt. Oh, I haven't even mentioned it yet. We're 20 minutes in. SD Bullion, guys, is channel sponsor, so I mention them most of the time in most of these videos. Check them out with the link down in the description, sdbullion.com. Right now, I think they got a sale on Silver Philharmonics, a flash sale, so pretty cool. Anyway, check them out. So, yeah, you want to get your hands on some physical assets, either gold or silver. And, it doesn't have to be uh, gold or silver. It could be real estate, could be, automobiles, art, firearms, whatever, just physical stuff that is going to. Someone says, can't listen to live streams at 2 times. Sorry, that caught my eye. That's hilarious. If you normally watch my videos on 2x, sorry, maybe I do talk kind of slow and deliberately. Sometimes it's hard for my brain to keep up. I know I'm the smart silver stacker, but I really came up with that name more as just alliteration rather than any kind of proclamation about my own intelligence. You can if you started on a lag. I'm not sure what that means. No counterparty risk with physical metals. Well, yeah, that is the whole advantage of holding hard tangible assets. I mean, whether it be real estate, although I would say real estate has somewhat more counterparty risk than precious metals because in the US, at least, there's no alloidial title. You can always have your land seized, so you don't really necessarily own it. You kind of rent it from the government, if you ask me. But physical metal, especially gold and silver, you can stash them away. They can be obscured. You might lose them in a boating accident, whatever. They're less counterparty risk there. Um, means wait until the video is half done, then 2x just catches up. Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean when it lags. Yeah, you can listen to my videos in 2x. Do a lot of people do that? Put it in the chat if you listen in 2x. It's not something I frequently do on YouTube, although I guess sometimes I do that. Sometimes when I'm editing video, I'll put it into 2x if it's me talking for a long time or something like that. But leave me a comment down below if you do that. I do find that to be kind of interesting. Depends on the talker. Yeah, anyway. Okay, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover today, folks. We got the yuan surpassing the US dollar in China's cross-border payments. It's still a major currency around the world. I don't mean to mislead anybody. The real numbers here are that globally, the yuan represents about 4.5% of cross-border payments, whereas the US dollar represents about 83.7%. So still, the US dollar represents the vast majority of international payments, but the yuan is on the rise and the dollar is on the decline. And this is not likely to be a trend that changes unless the US stops with the heavy-handed approach to sanctions and stops with the money printing and the debasement of the currency. Unless those trends are arrested, it is very likely that the dollar is going to continue losing market share, and that means it is going to decline in purchasing power, especially with the bailouts and the domestic inflation of the money supply. So get into hard assets while you can. It's possible, if you watch the video I put out earlier today, we might get a bit of a pullback in the precious metals. We take a look at some charts in that video and analyze why in the short term we could see a bit of a pullback. Not so sure if physical is going to drop. Even if we do get that, I think premiums might just rise to accommodate the lower spot price, meaning that physical will just hold value, kind of like it always does. But it's also possible that we could see a pullback enough in the spot price in the near future that we might get a buying opportunity. So, keep your powder dry. And in the long term, this is what's going to preserve value, not the paper fiat dollar. Of course, as the world is making this fourth turning shift, the dollar is heading towards losing its status as the world reserve currency, and we're getting these monumental shifts towards a multipolar world order. Just about anything is possible. You could see the dollar strengthen, could see it lose value rapidly in the short term, but in the long term, I think the writing's on the wall, and hard assets is where you're going to want to be. So thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe out there. Happy stacking, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker out.